27 of 33 in this course. This is a weekly interactive class where I want to hear what you think. So please ask questions at any time during the class. Check out past and future shows at bigquestionsanswered.com. This is a practical class that deals with personal to global issues as everything affects our happiness. This week, the first half hour will be about travel. We'll talk about how it will help you understand the meaning of life, learn good habits, and remove limitations to your life. The second half hour will be about any random questions you have about life. This week, my brother Tariq
Assalamu alaikum.
joining as a guest and a debater. Everything I say is based on tried and tested teachings of Islam. Why Islam? It's the most inclusive, scientific, comprehensive thought system I know. Please do like this video to support the show. Right, so let's get started with this. Oops, wrong link. Let's go for it again. So copy, paste. Here we go. There we go. Right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is how travel can add meaning to your life. And I'd like to put it as a question. How does travel change your thinking? Let me just make sure everything's all right there. There we go. Got lots
New
of computers.
perspective on
Yeah.
life.
So I'd like to start with a quote just to base all my thoughts on. And there's a quote from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He says, uh, so, what is the world to me? An example of me and the world is a traveler who naps or sleeps under the shade of a tree, or sleeps for a short while under the shade of a tree, then departs and leaves it. So it gives you sort of imagery that's very useful, and I'm going to break down that imagery in different ways. And one thing, as I've pointed out, number one is it helps you live a meaningful life. So I'm going to ask Derek to make a comment in a second after I make this little uh, comment on how this quote leads us to thinking about having a more meaningful life, and when we live as travelers, as it were. So the reason why we get depressed in the West, uh, where we largely focus on real things, is because deep down we know such things are a waste of time. We have a conscience that punishes us for anything that is not in line with our purpose, which is to do good things, which makes us closer to being at one with God. Does that make any sense? Should I summarize that in a different way? Does that make any sense, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just another example.
So, um, yeah, so we do indulge in things that, buying cars and things like that, and that's what we call being materialistic. And when we do things like that, we know it's not very meaningful, and so that's not the purpose that God created us with. So we can see when we don't work with or in line with our purpose, we have a system in our brain called a conscience, and it tells us off for doing things that are pointless or meaningless. We can mess around a little bit, but if we spend too much time messing around, we will be unhappy. And the opposite of messing around is doing good things. That's the only meaningful thing, doing good things for others, and that actually makes you closer to God. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not just makes sense, but do you disagree with that? I mean, feel free.
So,
Uh,
how I feel is like we have one life, and we need to see as much as we can of the world, and
okay.
that's the best, or that's a very good way of seeing how people live, how maybe they have less and they're happy. For example, some people have so many things and they're just miserable, and that kind of thing. You learn how to, you kind of tune in your life from your experiences and how other people live, and then you kind of tune it into something better. You
Hmm.
you better your life from what you see, good and bad.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, yeah, we'll be talking about how we learn from traveling as well.
Mm,
Different lessons we can learn from the people, different cultures, and things like that. So, I'll be going into more detail about that. So, my next point is be like a traveler, appreciating the things while you're here. Appreciate things while
yeah,
you're here. So, to break that down a little bit more, is strangely the fact that we are here on planet Earth for a short stay awakens our senses, so makes us feel more excited. So if you think it's a bit weird saying, okay, you've only got, years, and it sounds really kind of horrible to say something like that. But actually, when you realize you're not going to be here forever, then you suddenly start waking up to uh, the opportunity and the short, the the opportunity you have to do something useful while you're here. It's just like when you're on holiday, you're not always on holiday. So while you're on holiday, you make the most of it. And that same sort of mentality is what we need to awaken in us. And so, as there's a interesting thing about the Arabic word. So Arabic is the language used in the Quran, which is the guidebook for humanity and Muslims, everybody basically. And the Arabic word for human beings is the one who forgets. So we forget all sorts of really weird things. Like we forget that we're going to die. We somehow like it just leaves our mind. We forget when we make mistakes, and then we keep repeating them. So travel can work on that is a way of dealing with that weakness. It reminds us that we're here for a short time. Live like you're only here for a short time,
keep the
and
excitement.
then maybe, yeah, and then you take more advantage of the short time we have here rather than wasting it. What do you think about
Mm.
that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like it keeps you in a state of mind where you are always feeling there's something new all the time.
Yeah. So, by the way, I'm not talking about this. So, right now, I'm talking about be when you're even at home, be in the traveler mindset. So when Prophet
Okay.
Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that he is a traveler, he wasn't actually traveling. He was saying, I'm a traveler on this planet. I'm here for a little bit of time and I'll be gone soon. And when you think like that, the most successful people in the world think like that. So Steve Jobs says, you know, treat every day as if it's your last. Prophet Muhammad
Yeah.
actually said that as part of this. There's a longer quote that says, live as if you wake up in the morning, don't expect you to live till the end of the day. If you go to sleep at night, don't expect to wake up in the morning. Now that sounds miserable to some people, but actually that's a way of really feeling life if you do it that way.
I mean, if you
Um,
genuinely do that, it's very difficult to have that mindset. But
mm.
if you do, then you'll probably accomplish a lot more in that day, a lot more than if you didn't have that mindset, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting. You say it's
You get a lot
difficult to have
done.
that mind. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. How do you develop that mindset? Um, and I think you just one thing is at least try to remind yourself of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And the more you practice something, the more you remember it. So, anyway, the last thing I've got to say is about this mini section about developing meaning in your life. Don't collect things, collect experiences. So, to explain that point a bit more, point number 3 is most people are slaves to their jobs. A study has shown that in the UK, half of the people do not think that their jobs have any meaning at all. Okay, that's like off beyond. In the other half, there's lots of other terrible categories, right? So very few people would do their jobs for free. So think about
Mm.
that. Like you're doing stuff you don't want to do most of your time you're awake. Okay. Happiness is not the person with a ribbon tied around their neck. That's why I call it a tie. It's a really weird kind of piece of clothing. But somebody without shoes, looking scruffy. So the person who's really free is the person without shoes looking scruffy, strolling on a beach.
That
Yeah, I
person
love
is what,
strolling.
sorry? That person is what?
That's the one. The person who's really free is not the person who's
Free.
got
Free. Okay.
somebody, some a tie, tied around their neck, wearing clothes, silly clothes like a suit and all this kind of stuff. I think they're ridiculous clothes, right? Um, what a real freedom looks like is somebody without shoes, looking scruffy, but chilling out on a beach. You don't really use shoes on a beach, do you? Do you know what I mean? That's my kind of point. Like, if you think about when you're most happiest, you're not wearing a suit and tie, right? You're chilling out, enjoying nature and all this kind of stuff, right? So we spend our lives collecting things to impress other people who do not care about us, right? Instead of experiencing life by truly appreciating the world we live in. Oh, run out of time. Okay, so on the next one. So move on to habits that we can learn from traveling. So let me paste that in. Okay, so that was quicker than I thought. Always go quickly, this thing. So habits. I like to make a focus some sort of question. Can traveling make long-term life changes? And very short quote from Prophet Muhammad: travel is good for your health. So the first point is living like a tourist makes you chill, right? So don't keep rushing to be successful one day. So everybody's thinking, I'm going to be really successful if I just keep working, working, working. That's what you have in the West a lot. We just work really hard, okay, and we never smell the roses, as it were. The
Mm.
the the phrase "never smell the roses." Have you heard of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like appreciate like what you have right now. Just chill for a little bit. So I see how beautiful the world is right now without doing anything to achieve it. Like don't keep running somewhere and never enjoy where you are. Any thoughts about that?
Um, shop and. I mean, number two. Um,
Oh, I'll get to number two in a second. But number one, do you think let's because I asked Tariq to come on the show because he's done a fair bit of traveling, does a lot of traveling. Um, And so, do you think going to, I don't know, Morocco or Spain has made you more chilled a little bit, or not? Not really, when you come back.
um, personally, I don't think so. I mean, you enjoy the moment, and then you come back, and like you said, if you live every day like a traveler, but for me, I just enjoy that moment and then come back to normal life. It's different. It's
That's right,
different.
and I kind of expected that
I
because
think
so
that's
many
for most
people who
people
do
as well.
travel. That's right. Most people are like that. I've noticed they go to so many really beautiful countries, but they don't seem to take back the lesson. So it's not like it's automatic. You kind of have to try to learn the lesson and try to put that into your life. Anyway, next point is good habit. Copy good habits. Tourism sharpens your eyes to the details. So um, when you go traveling, a strange thing, it makes you suddenly some great person, some traveler once said, it's like being a child on caffeine when you're on travel. When you're a child, okay, when it's experiencing the world, they're like, oh wow, look at that
Caffeine.
thing, look at this thing. You know what I mean? And on caffeine, like hyped up, right? Like and that's what we are when we're traveling. We're spotting all these little small things. Oh, did you see that person who did that small thing? We take care of the small details, and then possibly when we're noticing it, maybe we might appreciate all those things. I think we do appreciate all those things when we go traveling, right? But again, we've got to learn it. So the kind of things I'm talking about, and you've been to, I don't know, Morocco, you've been to Oman, so you might be able to understand what I'm going to say. Like instead of you know eating chocolate like we do in the West all the time, maybe eat seeds. Or so, I mean, I don't really do that
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
That's a bad habit. But it's kind of like those are the kind of cool things go down and or drink and talk rather than watch screens. Right?
Mm.
Again, this is a thing like when I would go to Jordan, people are in parks in the middle of night, just sipping tea, nothing than just spending time talking to each other, which is really awesome. And
Yeah.
another thing is like hanging around poorer people. They're kind of more interesting than the richer people, because they just, what they have is they have more, they have what I call people rather than things. They have connections with people rather than really rich people. Even in Jordan, they're kind of closed off in their houses, rather than the poorer people are more connected with everybody in society, and it's a bit more interesting. Um, and then you
They're
also,
more,
you
much
get
more
to, when you talk
social
to poorer
in
people,
the poorer regions. You're saying
yeah,
much more,
that's
yeah,
right. That's what I find,
more
because
smiling, happy,
when you're
smiling.
rich, yeah, because when you, what you have is more options, and then most people are really bad at choosing the options. So they got an option of being more social or less social, because you can just go on Netflix non-stop or something, right? And people usually go for the options that are not good for them, because it's really hard to choose the right options that actually make you happy. Um, and the reason, I mean, there's a reason why, but I'm going to talk about that later on, why people make bad options, because it's not exactly a secret of which options to choose. And the small things are the big things is one thing I love to say. Like, when you notice all these small things, you go, wow, like so many, all these small things are the things that we really enjoy. Like, I don't know, can you tell me something that happened in Oman or Morocco that you remembered? Just tell me anything that you really enjoyed, not something you would put on Instagram, because that's the opposite of
I
the
was
stuff you
like,
really enjoy, I think.
first time I ever went fishing. It started at 2 a.m. and finished at 11 a.m.
Yeah. And
And I
so,
caught two
you know,
fish.
what did you enjoy most about that fishing trip, if you were to pick out one point?
I would say the people you're with, and just the adrenaline of having caught two fish, and the excitement of the wait, and just
Yeah,
the time of day, and it was just, everything was just perfect.
that's it. There wasn't like
And
you caught a
beautiful
shark
people.
or something. It was just normal fish. It wasn't because it was a big thing. It was just lots of small things.
Yeah,
The conversations, the people, the weather, kind of small stuff.
yeah, just
Yeah.
everything was beautiful.
So
Yeah.
I think we, hopefully we can learn that the small things are the big things, and that's really important, because people in the West make their lives miserable chasing big things, and they're really hard to achieve, and then they'll never be happy. Right. And when they do achieve those big things, it's usually quite shallow. Like, I'm going to have a really, really expensive car. Okay, you're in a really, really expensive car by yourself now. So what? These kind, we realize again and again that it's just for showing off. It's not, doesn't actually have much value. Doesn't mean you never have an expensive car. If it's really useful, great, but most of the time we spend so much money on things like that rather than the things that really make us happy. Anyway, so the last point I want to make is mental relief. So yeah, sure, obviously traveling, you can enjoy it, right? And this is something you were just talking about, like, you go traveling, you enjoy it, but when you come back, you're back to your normal self, right? And this is my point about that, is everything can be misused. So like, traveling can be such a great teacher, right? But if you use traveling as a type of escapism, this happens when you enjoy, like, just receiving from your, like, you, when you go traveling, if you just receive, or you don't, you're not particularly responsible, you're just killing time rather than taking what you've learned back home with you. So you're like, thank you, I love the food, thank you, and I love this and all that. You're not really participating in making things better, even for your guests, or your hosts rather, right? You're just receiving, and then you don't think about that, and you don't practice the lovely things that you received, which is, like, if you look in Arab culture, it's all about giving. That's why they're so happy. It's not, if they were all about taking like we are in the West, nobody's happy, right? So, and then if you don't participate in that when you're traveling, Like, say, you know what, you are so nice. You know what, I'm going to do something for you, and I'm going to compete with you. I'm going to be even nicer to you than you were to me.
Hmm.
Then you don't really
Yeah.
learn the lesson, you know. And my short quote is, heaven is where people do things for other people, recreate it at home by doing things for others. Any thoughts about that?
Sorry, I missed the last bit. You were
So
saying
I'm
recreate.
basically saying, you you know, you can either use travel as escapism from your life, like you quickly run away to another country, and and then you come back in your normal self, or you can learn, and you learn really by doing things for other people. That's what you actually enjoyed in Oman. You wouldn't be enjoyable if there were just selfish people there.
Doing things for other people, as in not kicking
Yeah,
back and
like,
being the guest and them being the host. Is that what you mean?
you should accept it, but you should also be even more generous back to them if you can, because that's how you practice the skill of happiness. This is like, is
Yeah, I mean
if you treat.
that's yeah. I mean that's really good.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't particularly. I'm just trying to remember. Like, I was just enjoying, being a guest there, and everyone was being very nice, and you know, you're saying to actually give back as well, as in you could count that as a smile. You can count that as
that's true.
appreciating their food and saying thank you and things like that, and that counts as giving back.
That is, yeah, I mean, it would be pretty lame if you were like, as sad or angry when they're giving you nice food,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's a
imagine,
start.
yeah, exactly. It's
It's a
like
start, but you should always
being
this is in the
appreciative.
Quran as well. Yeah, in the Quran, it's about competing and doing good things. So you should outdo them, and it's
Okay.
really hard to outdo Arabs, man. Okay,
Mm,
so like, and that's a really good competition, you know.
yeah.
And then the point is that you will actually be happier when you come back, because if you treat traveling like a school for learning happiness, and you practice, like, if I'm teaching math, you have to practice the math. You can't just be told the maths, right? So being generous, you have to practice being generous. You can't just be told
Yeah.
about it. It's not a theoretical
Yeah.
thing. So this class, there's no point just listening. You've got to do something at the end of it. Anyway, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. Why can't I just learn from the internet? Okay, this is about breaking your limitations. So this is taking your life to the next stage, as it were. Okay, this is how traveling can do that for you. So here's a quote from the Quran. O mankind, we have created you from male and female, and we have made you into tribes and sub-tribes, that you may know one another. Verily, the most honorable among you in the sight of Allah, that is God, okay, it's an ancient name for God in lots of different religions, Allah, is He who is the most righteous among you. Surely Allah is the all-knowing, all-aware. So there's a lot of different uh, valuable lessons we can learn from this quote. But when it says, so that we have created you to tribes and sub-tribes, that you may know one another, it's about the good qualities of each other. So remember, when you do an English translation from the Quran, that is from Arabic to English. Arabic is a very deep language, so you can't put all the full meanings in it. But the idea is that you learn from the great things from different cultures, is the point of it, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna
You know
make
what? No
go.
one another. You were saying.
Yeah, really know on each other for their different good qualities. Okay, and the best quality you can have is being a righteous person. It's not about, you're black, white, whatever. That doesn't make you better, right? That's what one of the things the Quran is saying there. But anyway, so how does traveling remove limitations? Okay, so what I want to say,
Limitations that
limitations in your thinking. So I'm going to explain that traveling, I feel, when I go to, especially go to the Middle East or somewhere, or lots of any other country, even European countries, I feel like traveling is like going to Mars. Now, that might sound a bit weird, okay, but I really do feel that cultures are so different that it's like I'm just on another planet. right? So traveling is like going to Mars, and it gives you ideas from outside the limitations of your culture that you're used to. So in British culture, we're just used to, and we think it's normal not to make eye contact, not to smile at people, right?
It's
But
weird,
off,
like, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
but like when you go to other countries where they do smile at each other and they're really friendly to each other and they're complete strangers, right? So
Mm,
I was in Jordan when I moved to Jordan, and I was walking around my first home there, and I was like, people were just saying Faddal, which means come into my house. And I was like, I was
mm.
confused. I thought maybe my Arabic's not good. So I asked one of my neighbors, and they was like, yeah, of course. Why shouldn't you go to his house?
But,
But I said, I
yeah,
don't know the guy. But it's like, so what? See, that the culture is so different. That's what I mean. It's like
yeah.
going to Mars sometimes. It's different cultures. Even in European countries, they've got things that are really different. Maybe not as different, right? Further you go, I suppose, the more different it's going to be. So we can. Um, we cannot learn about these alternative ways of thinking from mainstream media, which is increasingly just a propaganda machine. So you can't just go on the internet necessarily and get the real picture. Anyway, what are your thoughts about that, about removing limitations from your thinking by traveling?
So, like you said, if you come back with what you've seen back to normal life, and you try to implement something, and anywhere you go, and if you see something good, you try to replicate that.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you see hospitality in a much better way than you've seen over here, then you try to, you try to replicate that. Or, for example, um, just greeting people more openly and more and
Yeah,
smiling more, for
that's
example.
right. So hopefully you will replicate it when you see this really different thing. So you might be in England and be like, that's just a weird thing to do. And then if you do replicate it and you come back, maybe it'll be a long-term change. Or you might say, you know what, I want to make that thing that is making people so happy, because when people are smiling at each other, it makes people much happier, right? And people are talking to each other and socializing. That's one of, and this is not just me making it up, this is the biggest problem people face in the West is loneliness, and it causes many illnesses like stress and so many other things. So anyway, so cool. So limitations can be removed when you go outside the culture. Your culture is saying this is how the world works, and you go outside it and you start going, oh, maybe the world doesn't work like my culture has been telling me. So that's kind of the idea of that. Anyway, another thing, and I kind of mentioned this before, is become a kid again, right? What I mean by that is traveling gives you a perspective of seeing of the perspective of a kid seeing things for the first time, so showing you how to appreciate the small things.
Like, for
So
example, you'll be walking in the street and then you see a kid just staring at a pigeon and getting really excited.
yeah, and so maybe we should be excited about all these small
Mm.
things, you know, and we do when we're traveling, you know. And can you think of a small thing you were excited about?
I just
A
love
small
the
thing,
like on when you're on holiday, something small.
yeah. Let's
Just
go
the
to Oman,
scenery.
right?
Like, for example, I love
Yeah,
the look of a tree that is different to here.
100%, 100%. Yeah,
It's
yeah. I remember
so
palm trees.
refreshing to look at palm trees, for example. It just gives you such a endorphins. You know that endorphins
Yeah.
release when you just look.
And so what we should do when
Yeah,
we should come back, we should kind of appreciate the trees here because they're also amazing. It's just that we just got like used to them, which is not good, right? Because they
exactly.
do an amazing
People who
job.
live there, they're like palm trees. What you know,
Yeah,
but for
that's
us, it's
their
like
normal tree.
amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
last quick point in a few seconds, living a new reality. So many people completely change their lives. So many people, for example, become Muslim when they travel to Muslim countries because they see the the differences in social life and things like that, and they go, you know what, this is a really more wholesome way of life. Like, this is a practical demonstration of how my life can be different. I'm going to copy that. So you can completely come back with a new reality in your life. Any thoughts about that?
Sorry, uh, completely.
You can
Sorry, what was
come
that?
you can come back a new person. So many people and many YouTubers that I
I
watch,
wouldn't.
they've become Muslim because of, I don't know, just going to Muslim countries, and they go, oh, okay, that's so different.
I've never really experienced or can imagine completely being changed from, you know, visiting somewhere, for example. I can't imagine myself,
Maybe
but
if you, yeah. So some people, yeah, that's true. So I'm glad you said that, because lots of people won't, but many people do
mm,
have such a fundamental, like such a powerful feeling when they travel somewhere. They think, really, I really need to change my life, because I know I can see my life will be better if I make X, Y, and Z changes.
mm.
Um, it makes sense to make changes to your life if you can see a better example.
I
Anyway,
could
so
I could
go
see
on.
that maybe if I go to Mecca or something like that, and
You've seen lots of places where
yeah,
there's
yeah,
so many good things that you can
yeah, yeah,
copy. Not
mm,
everything is good, but you copy
mm,
the good things. But anyway, so is worrying useful? This is an interesting question, because you get also this made the reason why I got to pick this question is I see all sorts of ridiculous quotes, like, don't be a warrior, be a warrior. Like, that's what you kind of, these kind of things you hear on these new age gurus who try to make like these kind of rhyming bits of advice here, but it's not very helpful. If you're not happy, don't do you just tell them to be happy? If you're worrying, do you tell people to stop worrying? It doesn't make sense. So it's not really dealing with the root of the problem, is what I'm saying. So I'm going to give a quote to kind of properly start off my answer. But for him who fears to stand before his Lord, there are two gardens, and gardens are metaphorical words for paradise. So basically it means paradise in this life and the next. So that's from the Holy Quran. And by the way, I should have said maybe earlier on, if you go into the description, you can see a lot of the things I'm saying. The text of what I'm saying is already written in summary. So do check out the description or even in the comments. Anyway, so why do you worry? That's if
it's
we
actually it's quite important to worry. It's like, for example, it just means you care, for example, and you want to do something correctly, but there's a limit to worrying where it becomes a burden. But before it becomes a burden, it makes you stop and think and do things correctly.
Hmm. That's right. I like that. So you're basically saying there's got to be the right balance.
Mm.
Um, okay, and it's very easy, and it's too easy to go beyond that. So this is a massive problem where it might sound easy to say have the right balance, but very few people know how to have that balance.
It can turn
And
into
people,
paranoia.
not just paranoia, people are so scared of other people's opinions that they very rarely do what they actually want to do.
Express themselves
They're
not fully
Yeah, but
because
also
of
they're doing jobs, for example, that they hate, but they
mhm.
think will be, acceptable to society, things like that, right? Um, so uh, and so we actually do, so most of the things we do, most of society is doing things out of worry about what other people think, or caring about what other people think. So it's not a small issue. It's not about, can I have just the right balance, because very few people have the right balance. And
That's true,
there's
yeah.
a reason there's a reason for that, and there's a reason, or there's a way of fixing it, right? Okay, we are when we're what did I put here? So when you realize um, that there is a God for us to begin with, this is like the beginning of freedom, right? So first of all, how do we know there's a God? I'll just kind of I kind of repeat these kind of things, like why it's logical to believe in God very quickly. Even to make a drop of blood the size of a pinhead, okay, it should have taken trillions and trillions of times longer than the age of the universe because it's that complicated. Yeah, there's something called hemoglobin, and it
Yeah.
should have taken one little bit of hemoglobin molecule, which and you need 270 million of them or something to make a tiny drop of blood, right? Even to make one of them should have taken trillions of times longer than the age of the universe, right? This has been calculated. That's how
Wow.
insanely impossible it is for a human being to be
Subhanallah.
made, never
Yeah.
mind one drop of blood,
Subhanallah.
right? So you know there's a God, but not only then do you know there's a God that created everything, but if you look at the amazing machinery that's keeping us alive, like you don't see metal bits of machinery moving the clouds around and recycling your water and keeping there's not a stick keeping us at a perfect distance from the sun, Earth, and
What is?
but there's a millions of things keeping us alive constantly. So you can basically realize if you think or reflect, as they say, that there is definitely a God watching over you today and every day and keeping your very fragile bodies, our fragile bodies alive, right? So once you realize that, and then you start trusting in God, and so it's logical that you know there's a God, then
Mm.
once you start trusting in God and then listening to God, what trusting in means listening to all the advice God has been giving throughout the ages in different religions. And those advice are just simply be nice to other people because God doesn't really need anything from other you, except for also be thankful to me, that is God, right? Okay,
Yeah.
because
Be
that's
grateful.
part of
Yeah.
being a good, yeah. So basic thing. God doesn't need you to be grateful, but it's good for you to be grateful, right? We've known people who are good at, like, who know about happiness. They know being grateful is one of the key things for happiness, right? So when you start doing things like that, and when you start really depending on God, and you start realizing you don't have a boss. The only boss you have is God,
As
and the
Allah.
only thing you have to um, worry about is God. And when you start worrying about what God thinks, and God is the most powerful, then all the other human beings, they become like piddly, insignificant, unimportant people. You don't need to depend on human beings for money. You don't need to depend on human beings for love or anything, right?
Amazing. Mm.
Yeah, you will become free, right? And
Mm.
you will stop worrying, because that is the true cause of worrying. It doesn't mean you're horrible to people. It's the opposite, because God wants you to be kind, and then you'll get love from different people eventually, but you're not waiting for it. Any
Mm.
thoughts about that?
I mean, it's beautiful just to even thinking about trying to reach that level. You know, it's just so, if I'm just feeling for myself that if I have reached that level and just let everything go and just think like that,
I
it
think
will
you're
just,
making a really good point,
yeah,
and which is something I was supposed to say, which is start by doing small things and you'll
yeah,
see God helping you. But that doesn't mean just letting go. God, God listens to people who listens to him. So you first have to do good things. So God promises in the Quran that
mm,
if you're his servant, he will guide you and listen to your prayers, right? So it makes sense. God's not your
yeah,
slave,
yeah,
right? So you listen to God a little bit, and then God says, if you go to me one step, I'll come to you 10 steps. If you walk to me, I'll run to you. It's not
mm,
physical distance. It's like God
subhanallah.
is will be more kind to you than you are.
Yeah, you
You know
just
what I
have
mean?
to show that first step, and you just have to reach out. Is basically what Allah
Yeah.
wants you to do.
So I'm just going to summarize the two other points and probably copy paste them in the comments later for you to read. But it goes something like this: by worrying, your life stops from new possibilities. All the great things happen when you try new things, right? If you're worrying, you put yourself in a tiny, tiny box and nothing good happens. And the other point is worrying is useful if it's for fixing mistakes in your life, because you will not accept your own mistakes unless you try to fix them. When you try to fix them, you'll feel better about it because at least you tried. That's just how your conscience works. It won't let
Okay.
you off.
Yeah.
So anyway, cool. So let's quickly go on to the next point, which is, are problems just in our mind? So I'll quickly paste that there. And again, I'm going to read a quote from the Quran about this interesting topic. Whoops, here we go. So, um, this verse, this is, yeah, anyway, it goes something like this. Verse 2 goes like this: I tell you with certainty that there will be a time when time itself will seem to be flying by. So we're in those times, right? If you
Mm.
think about it, time is just like flying by all the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not in all countries, not for all people, but there. If you're feeling that, then this could be for you. In such a time, most people will feel lost, and you can say lost as a kind of depression, right? Um, and number 4 in this verse, except those who believe in the teachings of Islam, that is, those who do good deeds and teach the truth, and who steadily stay on this path by never letting themselves get too emotional, neither too excited or too sad. So the actual words are a lot more condensed, but I've kind of
Yeah.
expanded on some of the meanings. Okay, so you can check out the meanings. I'll probably put the quote in, but you can see it says verse 2 to 4 of chapter 103 if you want to check out for yourself the more condensed version of what I've just said. Anyway,
Yeah.
so are problems just in our minds? My first part of what I'm going to say is no, they're not just in your mind. If you are tied to a train track, okay, and a train is coming, the problem is real. Thinking in the now, I'm kind of answering a ridiculous thing that modern day gurus say, just be in the now,
Mm.
right? Being in now is not going to help you if you're stuck on a train track and you're about to die. That's not going to change anything, right? So um, that's my initial point. Any thoughts about that?
I mean, it's about how do you say, having a middle ground, and really realizing that you need to there's laughter, and then there's you know sometimes they say it's too much laughter over, you know
Too much excess or something like that? Too
yeah,
much?
excess, like it's really like a good thing to realize, to control, and be that person who doesn't seem to be not bothered about what you're saying, for example, not that style, but can take things in, can enjoy them, and can give you that feedback, but not in an extreme way, and in a very um, how do you say,
Hmm.
um,
Moderate, controlled way or
moderate
something?
and respectful way. I would say.
Hmm.
I would say
Interesting.
that is the Muslim way, isn't it?
Yeah. Being,
Ideally, to
yeah.
be in a way where you can converse with someone in such a way that it's just a decent way, not uh, um, you'd say
That's true.
antisocial. It
It
can be
sounds like,
antisocial.
yeah, it sounds like you're quoting, well, not quoting, but you seem to be saying something like what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said. He said something, gentility, being gentle, gentleness, that's the word. There is nothing that gentleness doesn't make more beautiful. So, and he said that to somebody who aren't a really good Muslim who answered back to somebody who's being rude to him. He said, just leave him alone. Don't say anything, you know. So there's all sorts of quotes like that. But anyway, so yeah, I think, and coming back to what we're talking about here, you were saying something about having the right balance, which is great, yeah. Because, and I started off by saying, you know, no, it's not just in your mind, but actually coming around the other way, yes, much of it is in your mind, right? But not completely. It's not like if you, so some people just try to make as if it's all in your mind and you can make the world disappear. You can make that train that coming down the train tracks about to run you over, it's going to make it disappear. No, it's not, right? But this is what I've got to say about it. Our mental attitude towards a problem is incredibly important in affecting how you feel towards the problems you feel, but um, but simply blocking them out is not the solution. The reason a problem feels bad is because you cannot see how it makes your life better.
Hmm.
Okay, so it sounds really strange, but if you can see how a thing makes your life better, then you feel better about it. So for a Muslim, there are no accidents in life. Okay, everything good and bad is tailor made for you. Okay, and you can deal with it. That's also from a verse of the Holy Quran, that we can handle everything that is thrown towards us, kind of paraphrasing, right?
There's
Okay, so
basically Allah does not bear you beyond your capacity.
perfect, exactly, much better than I said it. Yeah. So so everything is tailor made and it's designed for you so that you become a better person through it. So there's also a teaching in the Quran that everything that happens to a Muslim is to their benefit. If a bad thing happens, they learn
Mm.
from it. If a good thing happens, they're happy about it. Any thoughts about it? You kind of already given some thoughts, but any others?
Yeah, I mean, so if you have that in your mind that you can actually deal with these things, then you'll try harder to achieve them. For example, you could just give up if you say it's too much for me. You know, I'm, it's too much. But if you know Allah has told you something that no, I have given you the strength to deal with this issue, then you will pursue it rather than giving up, for example.
Perfect, exactly. That's why it's really useful to know. Like, if you think something's impossible, then you won't do it. It's like the famous thing about the 4 minute mile or something. Nobody thought they could run a 4 minute mile until somebody did it, and then loads of people started doing it. So, mentally, when you think you can do it, then you start doing it. So, when God
Yeah,
tells
yeah.
you, and there's a Quran and it's got so much good advice in there, so you start believing everything it says, and then it says in the book that you can deal with this problem. I've made this problem for you. Then you start having some confidence that you can do it and you actually give it a shot. So that's really a really useful psychological benefit of
Mm.
the Quran and the advice from God in that sense. And the last point I want to make about this, about our problems just in your mind, is kind of like summarizing what verse 4 says. So to positively affect your mind, you need to do you need to both do good things to make your conscience accept you, as well as to improve your environment. So there's the good things inside and outside, is what I'm saying. If you don't become a good so if you don't do a good don't become a better person, your conscience won't accept you. Your conscience is the thing that decides if you're happy or not, and it will beat you up more than anybody else can, right? Okay, so you have to do that, and also you have to improve your environment, because your environment affects you. So if you choose good relationships, you're going to be happier, right? So this is why doing good things is part of the solution to finding yourself, right? So this verse, those verses I mentioned, were about people who are lost, feeling lost, when you're miserable. Okay, to find yourself, as it were, which is the antidote for feeling lost. You do things by doing good things. That's what we really want to be. When we're good, we're happier. And that thing at the end about kind of summarizing in the last few seconds, but maybe I'll quickly read it. We should do all sorts of good things, deeds, but the best way of doing good deeds is to teach truths which make life easier for everyone. Another key to solving our problems is patience, which can only be practiced when we remain calm in good times and bad times. I said like Yoda in my comments, but I'm a big fan of Star Wars, but that's what I always say. Anyway, so it's all about staying calm at all times, like Yoda, I suppose. Yeah. Um. I don't know. Are you a Star Wars fan? A
So,
bit.
yeah, a little.
What's gone wrong with the? Uh oh. My this to make this on again or something. Okay.
Battery or
Never mind.
something.
Yeah, maybe. I was just gone to sleep or something. Anyway.
You can just use the
Um.
normal speakers from the laptop, innit?
Yeah. Hopefully you can't hear feedback. But anyway, I'll fix that in a minute. All right. So. Oops, where am I looking? I'm looking for the notes for the last bit. Okay, it's an interesting another one. Okay. So, does poor mental health mean you have weak faith? So, I really hope I can fix this. Oh, I can see
You
a
mean,
question, and maybe we'll change the question. Bit of a random one, but do you know if the gospel has been changed? Okay,
hmm,
so I think we maybe let's make that the question then, and then we'll deal with that. Do we know if the gospel? Let's put that on the just a button. Jenna. Okay, cool. So if the gospel has been changed, so kind of like has been changed. I'm putting the here as well, and I'd like to somehow possibly break it down. So can it be from God is one thing. Okay. Historical evidence. And what other things could we talk about? Right. So I suppose that's kind of it. It's a shame this thing's gone to sleep. But anyway, I'll just get going and hopefully this thing will wake up my
I can
earphones.
hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. It's just um yeah, anyway. So there's historically we can prove that well, the Gospels, which is the New Testament, um, has been changed because even the so-called writers, you only know their first names. It's ridiculous. It's kind of like the least reliable historical document out there. There's so much evidence that it's been changed. Like people know, for example, there's Council of Nicaea where they literally burnt so many of the books that they didn't agree with, right? Um,
Was it called?
I mean, even the fact that can you say the gospel has changed kind of it almost doesn't even make sense because it's not what a lot of the gospels, I'm not sure if you count Paul's so-called Saint Paul's teachings, his letters, they were in complete contradiction to everything Jesus said. So he claimed, this guy called Saint Paul, who was actually somebody who used to hunt down Christians, okay, and he never met Jesus, okay, and he said that he had a vision and Jesus spoke to him and nobody else saw this vision and basically told him exact opposite of everything Jesus had taught in his whole life. So the idea that it's from God is so suspicious in 101 different ways. Like the Bible itself, if you just read the beginning of the Bible, it will tell you that the earth was created first, like before the rest of the universe. There's a bit of light before that, and then after that they made Earth, and then the rest of the universe was created. It's like that's completely wrong. And some people say, well, your science book tells you that, right? But maybe the science book is wrong, which is a lot of what a lot of Christians say, right? And that's just like saying 1 + 1 is wrong. Yeah, because science isn't just some idea that somebody had. It starts off with 1 + 1 is 2, then they use more and more complicated maths, and then it arrives at where we are. So, for example, we know the age of the universe by doing a similar thing that what you do when you check out if there's a baby or if the baby's healthy within a mother's womb, the ultrascan thing, right? So, similar sort of technology. So if that works for, a baby's belly, I mean a mother's belly, then it all kind of, and you don't deny that technology working, then why do you deny it as soon as it disagrees with your beliefs, right? So has it changed is almost not a non-existent or incorrect question. It's like it's it's is it from even is it from God? If it was from God at one point, which we Muslims do believe it was from God originally, the Bible, which is the Old Testament, and some parts of the New Testament, because some parts of the New Testament do say what Jesus actually said, right?
Hmm.
Has it changed? Well, it must have, because if it's in contradiction with science and just the logic, all sorts of logic that we know, and it says even things like you can kill your slave, right? Like, can you accept that that would be from God who created all human beings? Why would he be mean to certain human beings and allow them to be killed for no good reason, right? So there's so many reasons why you would say no, it's not. It has changed because it can't be from God. If it was from God, then it wouldn't contradict science. So somebody must have changed it so that it no longer, you know, uh, is really from God. Any thoughts? I mean, does that make sense? Is that confusing what I just said, Tariq? Does that make sense to you?
I mean, you can say how it's addressed as well. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I couldn't hear any of that. That was weird. Oh,
Can you
it's
hear me
woken
now?
up now. Cool. Appreciate you saying that. But then historical evidence, there's a lot more. Can you say something, Tariq?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear
Oh
me
yeah, I
now?
can hear you now. Now it's
Yeah.
woken up for you.
So I
Okay.
said, it's how is it addressed? Who is it addressing to? How is it? For example, the Holy Quran. Every chapter starts with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
Which is in the name of God, the gracious and merciful. Yeah.
Yeah. And how is the Bible addressing? How is it addressing? Who is it
Who is it
addressing?
addressing? Yeah.
And think about it that way.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's another point, because Jesus said he very clearly said he'd only come to talk to the Israelites, the 12 tribes of Israel, the lost sheep of Israel, in his own words. So, why would it then? We can't rely on this guy called Paul who says, hang on a minute, Jesus actually came for everybody, which doesn't make sense, and
Mm.
he was actually an enemy of Jesus's brother, who was left in charge of.
You have
Uh,
another comment. Yeah.
yeah, so we got more comments, maybe along the same lines. Alika, welcome back. Haven't heard from you for a while.
Uh-huh.
So she's a Christian, so maybe she's defending something. Bring the Torah. It was then brought. Um, so he then withdrew the cushion from beneath him and placed the Torah on it, saying, I believed in thee and him. I'm not trying. Oh, okay. Oh, I think you're sort of quoting maybe some sort of. So this sounds like she's quoting some sort of saying of Prophet Muhammad. Um, Muhammad says he believed in it, so why don't you? Muhammad speaking. Right. So we're talking about the original teachings, not the man-made edition. So we believe in the original teachings, but not the changes made to it. So all religions, we also believe not just in the Torah, we believe in so many religions, the Vedas and things like that, but not the changes made in them. So hopefully that makes sense, which I think is reasonable. We believe in stuff from God, okay, but not like if somebody scribbles something random into a Bible, we're not going to start believing that as well. Like imagine here's a Bible and then somebody crosses out and then you know makes up a new story, which is basically what St. Paul did. He said suddenly that you don't have to do anything the Bible says. So that's a bit weird, isn't it? He said basically said, don't worry about controlling what you have to eat. You know, the Jews, for example, don't eat pork, and he said, no, it's all right. But Jesus never ever said anything like that in his whole life while he was, in the writings within the Bible. So that's what we mean by that. It's just being changed, and people added things to it, especially Saint Paul. The original teachings was with Muhammad at the time. When after Muhammad's time was the Bible changed? So there are, in terms of there are no original manuscripts of the Bible, right? So you have to go, the earliest writings were from 30 to 60 something years later, and we don't even know who wrote them. So you can't say what the original teachings are. That's a huge mess of what the original teachings are. And if you do go to the original teachings, or the nearest thing we have, which are the Greek manuscripts, they're so full of contradictions about who is whose father and when they were born and how old they were, and they're just endless contradictions. And just the fact that if you really believe it's from God, then how can it say things that are clearly against science, like the earth was made before the rest of the universe? But anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate the questions, and hopefully catch you next week. Thank you very much for taking part. Thank you everybody
Thank you
for
very much, everyone.
watching. Yeah, and I appreciate you, Tarek, for participating. Makes the show much easier for me. Peace be
Yeah.
upon you.
You're
Catch you
welcome.
next
Yeah.
week. Same time, 7 to 8 p.m. Bye. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.